The worst part of being accused of betrayal was not the whispering. It was watching the person you loved believe the whispers before he believed you. Lucien Everhart had spent 5 years building a life around one man, Soren Whitaker, the alpha everyone admired and feared. He never cared about Soren's wealth, his power, or the perfect image people saw from the outside. Lucien loved the quiet moments nobody else noticed, the way Soren always checked the locks twice before bed, the way he pretended not to need help when he was exhausted, the way he carried the weight of being an alpha who had been told he could never have a family. Now Lucien stood in the middle of a luxury dining room, one hand resting protectively over the secret he had been waiting to share, and felt that entire future slipping away. The dinner was supposed to be a celebration. The candles were glowing. The table was filled with expensive dishes, and for the first time in months, Lucien felt ready to tell Soren the news that had changed everything. He was pregnant. Their child was real. Their family was finally beginning. But before Lucien could speak, another voice cut through the room. Soren's former lover, Dorian Ashford, placed his glass down and looked around the table with a calm expression that made Lucien's heart sink. "There is something everyone here deserves to know," Dorian said. The room went silent. Lucien felt the warmth disappear from his hands. Dorian's eyes moved toward him. "Lucien is pregnant." A few shocked breaths filled the room. Then Dorian delivered the words that shattered everything. "But Soren cannot be the father. Doctors confirmed years ago that he was infertile." Lucien stared at him, unable to understand how a moment that should have been filled with happiness had turned into a courtroom where he was already found guilty. He looked at Soren, waiting for the one person who knew his heart better than anyone, waiting for him to laugh and say this was impossible, waiting for him to choose him. But Soren did not move. The alpha who could face business rivals, impossible negotiations, and entire rooms of people judging him looked at Lucien with a pain-filled silence. "Is there something you need to tell me?" Soren asked quietly. That question hurt more than any accusation. Lucien swallowed hard. "You really think I would do that to you?" For a moment, Soren looked like he wanted to believe him, like there was a battle happening behind his eyes. But years of believing he could never have children had created a wound deeper than either of them realized. Dorian's words had found that wound perfectly. "I don't know what to believe right now," Soren finally said. Lucien felt something inside him break, not because Soren was angry, but because he sounded uncertain. After everything they had shared, uncertainty was the thing that destroyed him. Lucien quietly removed his hand from the table. He did not argue. He did not beg. He simply looked at the man he loved and realized he was standing alone. "I hope one day you remember who stayed when everyone else walked away," Lucien whispered. Then he left. The next morning, Lucien sat alone in a small apartment across the city, surrounded by boxes he had not finished unpacking. The luxury home, the beautiful view, the life he thought he would have, all of it felt distant now. He was afraid. Afraid of raising a child alone. Afraid that the person he loved most had already decided he was a liar. But there was one thing he refused to lose: himself. Meanwhile, Soren stood in his father's office, staring at an old medical file that had just been opened for the first time in years. The documents inside did not match the memories he had carried his entire adult life. His father looked at him with a serious expression. "Soren, this was never a normal medical result." For the first time since the dinner, Soren felt something stronger than anger. He felt fear. Because if the truth was different, then the person he had pushed away might have been innocent all along. And somewhere across the city, Lucien was preparing to move forward without him. But Soren had finally found the first clue that could change everything. Lucien Everhart had always believed silence was something peaceful. A quiet morning, a quiet room, a quiet moment shared with someone who understood you without needing words. But after leaving Soren Whitaker's home, silence felt completely different. It felt like the space between two people who had once promised forever. 3 days had passed since the dinner that changed everything. Lucien stayed in his small apartment near the city park, trying to rebuild a routine that no longer included a powerful alpha husband, a luxury home, or the future he had imagined. He continued working remotely, answering research requests, and organizing medical records, because staying busy was the only way to stop himself from thinking about the moment Soren looked at him like a stranger. He was not angry anymore. Anger was easier. What remained was disappointment. The kind that came from realizing the person you trusted most could still hurt you without raising his voice. Across the city, Soren Whitaker was experiencing something he had never faced before. Failure. Not in business. Not in negotiations. Those battles had rules. This one did not. As the CEO of Whitaker Biosystems, Soren had built a reputation as an alpha who could solve any problem. Executives waited for his decisions. Competitors respected his name. Employees followed his orders without question. But now he sat alone in his office, staring at the medical documents that had destroyed everything he thought he knew. The investigation was still ongoing, but one thing was becoming impossible to ignore. The information he trusted for years had never been as simple as he believed. For the first time in his life, Soren did not want control. He wanted the truth. And more importantly, he wanted to understand why Lucian had looked more hurt than guilty. That question stayed with him. Days later, Soren found Lucian at a small community health center where he volunteered twice a week. It was not the kind of place people expected to see the head of a billion-dollar company. The building was old, the waiting room was crowded, and the resources were limited. But Lucian moved through the room like he belonged there. He helped organize patient files, explain medical information in simple language, and remembered small details about everyone who walked through the door. Soren stood quietly near the entrance, watching the man he had accused. The world saw Lucian as a quiet omega connected to a powerful alpha. But Soren was seeing something different. He was seeing someone strong. Someone who continued helping others, even while carrying his own pain. When a young patient became nervous about a medical procedure, Lucian immediately stopped what he was doing and sat beside him. He did not promise everything would be perfect. He simply said, "You do not have to be afraid of something just because it is unfamiliar." Soren felt those words hit deeper than he expected, because they were words Lucian had lived by. After the patient left, Lucian noticed him. The surprise on his face quickly turned into caution. "What are you doing here?" he asked. Soren did not answer with excuses. For once, he did not hide behind his position. "I wanted to see you." Lucian looked away. "You already saw me. You decided what I was." The words were calm, but they hurt more than anger. Soren accepted that. "You are right." That simple admission made Lucian pause. Soren Whitaker was not a man who apologized easily. He was known for confidence, certainty, and control. Seeing him admit fault was unfamiliar. "I do not expect you to forgive me," Soren continued. "But I need you to know something. I am investigating what happened, and until I understand everything, I will make sure nobody damages your reputation." Lucian studied him carefully. He wanted to believe him, but trust was not something that returned because of a few words. "Why?" Lucian asked. Soren looked at him for a long moment. "Because even when I thought you hurt me, you were still the person I spent years trusting with my life." For the first time since the dinner, Lucian saw a crack in the perfect image of Soren Whitaker. Not weakness, something more human. A man who was afraid he had lost something precious. Before Soren left, he placed a small envelope on the table. Inside was a document offering Lucian temporary protection through his company's legal team and medical support during his pregnancy. No conditions, no demands, just help. Lucian stared at the offer, confused by the kindness he did not expect. Then his phone rang. It was Soren's assistant. The message was simple. A public announcement had been scheduled. Soren Whitaker was about to make a statement defending Lucian in front of the entire company. Lucian froze, because for the first time, Soren was not asking him to trust him in private. He was choosing to stand beside him where everyone could see. Lucian Everhart had expected many things when he agreed to meet Soren again. He expected anger. He expected questions. He even expected another painful conversation where he would have to defend himself. What he did not expect was to see the most powerful alpha in the city standing outside a small community health center, holding an umbrella over a stack of donated medical supplies because the delivery driver was running late. It was such a simple thing that Lucian almost did not recognize him. The man everyone knew as Soren Whitaker, the untouchable CEO who controlled a massive company with a single decision, was standing in the rain helping carry boxes like any other volunteer. "You know you have people who can do that for you," Lucian said quietly. Soren looked up. "I know." He adjusted the box in his arms. "But they cannot do everything for me." It was a small answer, but it stayed with Lucian. Since their last conversation, something had changed. Soren was still powerful, still composed, still the alpha whose name opened doors across the country. But around Lucian, he was different. He listened. He waited. He did not demand forgiveness. He simply showed up. Over the next few weeks, their lives slowly became connected again. Not because Lucian had forgotten what happened, and not because Soren expected everything to return to normal. It happened because Soren started noticing things no one else did. He noticed Lucian skipped meals when he was focused on work. He noticed Lucian always carried extra supplies for other people, but never bought anything for himself. He noticed that the Omega everyone had judged as fragile was actually the strongest person in every room. One afternoon, Soren arrived at the health center with lunch for the staff. Everyone immediately became nervous. The CEO of Whitaker Biosystems walking into their small building felt impossible. People straightened their clothes, lowered their voices, and waited for instructions. But Soren ignored the attention. He walked directly to Lucian and placed a container on his desk. "You forgot to eat again." Lucian blinked. "How do you know that?" Soren looked at the untouched coffee beside him. "Because you always do the same thing when you are worried." Lucian stared at him, surprised. He had spent years feeling like Soren saw everything except him. Now he was realizing the opposite might have been true. Soren had always noticed. He just had not known how to express it. Later that week, Lucian attended a charity event connected to the medical center. He almost refused to go. He knew many people there would remember the rumors. He knew some would still see him as the Omega who had embarrassed a powerful Alpha family. But Soren personally asked him to attend. "You deserve to be there," Soren said. "Not because you are my husband. Because of who you are." Those words followed Lucian all night. At the event, several executives greeted Soren warmly before looking at Lucian with polite curiosity. One of them asked, "Is he here as your guest?" Before Lucian could answer, Soren calmly replied, "No. He is here because he is the person who created the medical outreach program that helped thousands of patients last year." The room became quiet. Soren continued, "Most people know my company name. They do not know his. That should change." Lucian felt something he had not felt in a long time. Not protection, recognition. Soren was not standing in front of him because he thought Lucian was weak. He was standing beside him because he finally understood his worth. Later that evening, while leaving the event, Lucian noticed something unexpected. Soren removed a family ring from his pocket before entering the building and put it back on after they left. Lucian looked at it carefully. "You do not usually take that off." Soren became quiet. "There are things about my family that I have never told you." Lucian sensed the weight behind those words, but he did not push. For the first time, he trusted that Soren would tell him when he was ready. As they walked outside, a group of reporters approached, asking questions about the rumors surrounding their marriage. Lucian instinctively stepped back, expecting Soren to handle everything alone. But Soren did something different. He reached for Lucian's hand in front of everyone. "My family matters," Soren said. "And Lucian is my family." The cameras flashed. The rumors would not disappear overnight. The damage was not magically repaired. But something important had changed. For the first time since the dinner, Lucian did not feel like he was standing alone. And for the first time, Soren realized the person he had almost lost was not just someone he loved. He was the person who made him want to become better. But the next morning, a new message arrived on Soren's phone. A message connected to the medical investigation. It contained one sentence that changed the direction of everything. The person who had altered his medical records had not acted alone. Lucian Everhart thought the hardest part was surviving the rumors. He was wrong. The hardest part was watching people slowly decide that even if he was innocent, he still did not belong beside Soren Whitaker. After the charity event, the public attention became impossible to ignore. Photos of Soren holding Lucian's hand appeared everywhere. And while some people praised the Alpha CEO for protecting his spouse, others questioned why someone like Soren would stand beside an Omega with no powerful family name, no corporate influence, and no public reputation. Lucian had spent his entire life proving his value through his actions, not his connections. But now, every achievement he had earned seemed invisible compared to one accusation. The morning after the event, Soren arrived at the company headquarters and immediately noticed the change in the atmosphere. Employees who usually greeted him confidently became careful around him. Conversations stopped when Lucian entered the room. Soren noticed every single look. Years ago, he would have ignored it. He would have considered public opinion a simple business problem. But now, every judgment against Lucian felt personal. During a board meeting, one executive finally said, what many people were thinking, "Soren, Your personal situation is affecting the company's reputation. Lucian sat quietly beside him, already preparing himself to leave. He did not want Soren to lose support because of him. Before Lucian could stand, Soren spoke. His voice was calm, but the entire room became silent. My company's reputation is built on truth and responsibility, not on abandoning someone when people start asking questions. The executive looked surprised. This is about protecting the company. Soren looked directly at him. No, this is about whether we have the integrity to protect someone who has done nothing wrong. Lucian looked at him. The old Soren would have chosen the easiest path. The old Soren would have protected the company image first. This Soren was choosing differently. After the meeting, Lucian quietly asked, "You did not have to do that." Soren looked at him. "Yes, I did." There was no hesitation in his answer. "Because I should have done it the first time." Those words stayed with Lucian. Soren was not trying to erase the past with a grand gesture. He was acknowledging it. Later that week, Dorian Ashford returned to the public conversation. He gave an interview suggesting that he was only trying to protect Soren from being deceived. He carefully avoided direct accusations, but the message was clear. He wanted people to believe Lucian was a mistake Soren was too proud to admit. The interview spread quickly. Lucian watched the reactions online and felt the old fear return. Maybe no matter what happened, people would always see him as the problem. That evening, Soren found him sitting alone in the apartment, staring at the screen without reading anything. Soren did not tell him to ignore it. He did not tell him to be stronger. Instead, he quietly took the phone away and placed it on the table. You do not need to keep hurting yourself to prove you can handle pain. Lucian looked at him. You used to think I was the person who hurt you. Soren lowered his eyes. I know. The honesty made the room quiet. And I have to live with that. But I will not let other people repeat my mistake. For a moment, Lucian saw something he had never seen before. Soren Whitaker, the alpha everyone believed was impossible to shake, looked genuinely afraid. Not of losing money, not of losing status, of losing Lucian. The next day, Soren invited Lucian to a private company gathering. Lucian almost refused. He knew many people there still had doubts. But Soren simply said, "Come because you deserve to be there, not because you need me to protect you." At the gathering, several executives approached Soren first, but when they asked about Lucian, Soren did not answer for him. He turned to Lucian instead. Tell them what you created. It was a small action, but it mattered. Soren was not speaking over him. He was giving him space. Lucian explained the medical outreach program he developed, the improvements it brought, and the lives it helped. By the end of the conversation, the people who had underestimated him were no longer looking at him as an accessory to Soren's life. They were looking at him as someone impressive on his own. Later that night, as they walked outside, Soren removed his coat and placed it over Lucian's shoulders when the temperature dropped. It was a simple gesture, almost automatic. Lucian smiled slightly. You know, people are starting to think you are different around me. Soren looked at him. Maybe they are right. For the first time, Lucian did not pull away from that possibility. He still carried the pain of what happened. He still did not know if trust could fully return. But he was beginning to see that Soren was not only trying to prove Lucian's innocence. He was trying to become someone worthy of him. Then Soren's phone rang. The expression on his face changed immediately. The investigation had uncovered the next piece of information. The person connected to the altered medical records had access to information from inside Soren's own family. And suddenly, the question was no longer only who had lied. It was who had been helping the lie survive for years. Lucian Everhard had started to believe that maybe Soren Whitaker was finally letting him see the man behind the reputation. The powerful alpha CEO who once seemed impossible to reach had begun showing small signs of change. He listened when Lucian spoke. He noticed the things everyone else ignored. He stood beside him when the world questioned him. For the first time since the dinner that destroyed their marriage, Lucian felt something dangerous returning. Hope. But hope became complicated when the person you were beginning to trust was still hiding something from you. After the company gathering, Lucian noticed small things he could not explain. Soren received private calls and immediately stepped away. Certain family members became unusually quiet when Lucian entered the room. Even the way people treated Soren was different when they thought Lucian was not watching. It was not fear exactly. It was something closer to respect mixed with caution. One evening, Lucian found Soren in his office reviewing old documents. The same office where they had once celebrated business victories and plan their future. Soren quickly closed the file when he noticed Lucian. That single movement made Lucian stop. What was that? Lucian asked. Soren looked away for a moment. Nothing you need to worry about. The answer was familiar. Too familiar. Lucian felt the same painful distance he had felt before. The same feeling of being protected from the truth instead of trusted with it. That is what you said before, Lucian replied quietly. Soren immediately understood what he meant. The medical records. The accusation. The night Lucian left. Soren stepped closer. This is different. Then tell me why. Soren did not answer quickly enough. And that silence told Lucian more than words could. A few days later, Soren finally asked Lucian to come with him to the Whitaker family estate. Lucian had visited many impressive places because of Soren's world, but this place felt different. The property was not just wealthy. It carried history. Portraits covered the walls. Family names were carved into displays. Every person there knew exactly who Soren was. Not just a CEO, not just an alpha. Someone connected to a legacy far older than the company itself. Lucian remembered the ring he had seen Soren remove before entering events. The secret of conversations. The way people changed their behavior around him. Now, the pieces began forming a picture. During dinner, an older family member finally revealed the truth. Soren was never just the head of Whitaker Biosystems. Lucian looked at Soren. The alpha remained silent. He is the official successor of the Whitaker family organization and the person responsible for protecting its interests. Lucian felt the room become heavier. Not because Soren was powerful. He already knew that. The problem was that Soren had allowed him to believe he knew everything. After dinner, Lucian confronted him. How long were you going to wait? Soren's expression changed. Lucian, how long were you going to let me think I was finally seeing the real you? His voice was not angry. It was hurt. That was worse. Soren lowered his eyes. I wanted to tell you, but you did not. The truth landed between them. Soren explained that his position came with responsibilities he never wanted. When they first met, he was afraid Lucian would only see the power, the family name, and the expectations attached to him. He wanted someone who loved Soren, not the person everyone else demanded he become. I thought if you knew everything, you would leave. Lucian stared at him. You were afraid I would leave, so you decided I could not choose for myself? Soren had no answer. Because Lucian was right. This was not the same betrayal as before. Soren had not lied to hurt him. He had hidden the truth because he was afraid. But fear did not make the silence disappear. Lucian looked at the man who had fought to prove he believed in him, then realized Soren still struggled to believe he deserved the same honesty in return. You keep protecting me from the truth, Lucian said softly. But you never ask if I am strong enough to face it with you. Soren's expression broke for the first time. The alpha who could command companies and influence entire industries looked completely lost. I do not know how to lose you again, he admitted. Lucian wanted to believe him. A part of him already did. But another part remembered standing alone in that dining room, waiting for Soren to choose him. The next morning, Lucian returned to his apartment. Not because he stopped caring. Because he needed space to understand whether love could survive another secret. Soren watched him leave without trying to stop him. He finally understood that protecting someone did not mean keeping them close at any cost. Sometimes it meant giving them the freedom to decide. But before Lucian could even process everything, a new message arrived from the investigation team. The hidden medical records had been traced to a source, and the name attached to the file was someone Lucian had never expected to see. Lucian Everhard had spent the last few days telling himself that distance was necessary. It was easier to think when he was not standing beside Soren Whitaker and remembering all the reasons he still cared. It was easier to protect his heart when he could pretend the Alpha CEO was only the man who had doubted him. But memories were not that simple. Lucian remembered the quiet moments. The way Soren always placed a glass of water near him when he worked late. The way he remembered every small preference Lucian thought nobody noticed. The way he looked at him when he believed no one was watching. The problem was not that Soren did not care. The problem was that Soren had spent years believing he had to carry every burden alone. And Lucian did not know if love could survive that kind of silence. The investigation into the altered medical records continued, but the person connected to the file remained protected by layers of old family connections. Every answer seemed to create another question. Lucian tried to focus on his own life, but one evening, a sudden storm hit the city. The power went out in his apartment building, and the temperature dropped quickly. Lucian, already exhausted from work and trying to manage everything alone, sat in the dark with a blanket around his shoulders when he heard a knock. He opened the door and froze. Soren stood there, soaked from the rain, holding a small bag of supplies. "How did you know I was here?" Lucian asked. Soren looked uncomfortable, almost embarrassed. "I asked the building manager if everyone was safe." Lucian raised an eyebrow. "Everyone?" Soren paused. "I was worried about you." It was such a simple confession that Lucian did not know how to respond. This was not the confident alpha who commanded boardrooms. This was a man standing in the hallway, uncertain if he was allowed to enter. Lucian stepped aside. "Come in before you catch a cold." Soren almost smiled. Almost. Inside the apartment, Soren checked the windows, fixed the small problem with the heater, and quietly placed the supplies on the kitchen counter. He did not act like someone trying to impress him. He acted like someone who had noticed Lucian needed help and wanted to provide it. "You do not have to keep doing things like this," Lucian said. Soren looked at him. "I know. Then why do you?" Soren was silent for a moment. "Because before, I thought protecting you meant controlling the situation, making decisions before problems reached you." He looked down. "I was wrong." Lucian watched him carefully. An apology would have been easy. Words were easy for powerful people. But Soren was finally admitting something much harder, that his need for control had hurt the person he wanted to protect. Later that night, with the storm still covering the city, Soren told Lucian something he had never shared before. Growing up, he was taught that an alpha's value came from strength, success, and the ability to never show weakness. Every mistake became a failure. Every emotion became something to hide. When doctors told me I could not have children, I felt like I had lost the one thing everyone expected me to provide, Soren admitted. I convinced myself that if I could not be perfect, I had to become untouchable. Lucian's expression softened, but he did not forget his own pain. "Soren, I understand why you were afraid, but you have to understand why I was hurt." Soren nodded. "I do." There was no argument, no defense, just acceptance. That mattered more than Lucian expected. The next morning, Soren did something different. He did not make decisions for Lucian. He asked, "What do you need?" Lucian looked surprised. It was such a simple question, but it was the first time Soren had given him the choice instead of assuming the answer. Over the next several days, they slowly rebuilt what had been damaged. Soren attended Lucian's medical appointments, not as someone taking control, but as someone showing support. He listened when Lucian explained his fears. He respected every boundary Lucian set. And Lucian began seeing the man behind the title. Not the CEO, not the powerful alpha, just Soren, a lonely man who had spent years believing he was only valuable when he was needed. One evening, Lucian found Soren asleep in a chair beside his desk after reviewing documents for the investigation. The famous alpha who made entire companies wait for his decisions looked completely exhausted. Lucian quietly placed a blanket over him. When Soren woke up, he looked surprised. "You did not have to do that," he said. Lucian gave a small smile. "I know." The words carried more meaning than either of them expected. For the first time, they both understood something had changed. They were no longer rebuilding a marriage because of responsibility, reputation, or the child they were expecting. They were rebuilding because they were choosing each other again. But the peace did not last. The next morning, the investigation team delivered new information. The person behind the altered medical records had not only manipulated Soren's past, they had also been watching Lucian's pregnancy from the beginning. And now, they knew Soren and Lucian were starting to trust each other again. Lucian Everhard had started to believe that maybe the hardest days were behind them. Not because the pain was gone. It was not. The memory of that dinner still existed, and the fear of being abandoned again still lived quietly in the back of his mind. But Soren had changed. He had stopped trying to solve everything with power. He had started listening. He had started asking instead of deciding. For the first time in weeks, Lucian felt like he was not fighting alone. That was why the message hurt so much. It arrived on a morning that was supposed to be ordinary. A simple article appeared online with a headline that made Lucian's hands go cold. It showed private documents connected to his marriage with Soren, but the information had been twisted into something cruel. According to the report, Lucian had entered the marriage, knowing about Soren's family influence, and had used the relationship to secure protection and status. The article included a contract that appeared to show financial arrangements between the Whitaker family and Lucian's previous medical work. It was incomplete. It was misleading. But to anyone looking from the outside, it told a simple story. A powerful alpha had been manipulated by an ambitious omega. Lucian stared at the screen, unable to breathe for a moment. The worst part was not the strangers judging him. He had survived that before. The worst part was seeing the same pattern repeating. Another secret. Another piece of information hidden from him. Another moment where he wondered if he had misunderstood the person standing beside him. By noon, the situation had reached the Whitaker company. Executives demanded answers. Family members questioned Soren's judgment. Some claimed Lucian had always been a risk to the family name. Some suggested the marriage should have ended the moment the rumors began. Lucian attended the emergency meeting because he refused to hide. He sat beside Soren, holding himself together while dozens of eyes watched him. Dorian Ashford was there too. He stood near the end of the room with a calm expression, pretending concern. "I do not think anyone wants to hurt Lucian," Dorian said. "People just want honesty." Lucian looked at him and immediately understood. This was not about honesty. This was about making everyone question him again. The same person who had started the original accusation was now controlling the story once more. But the evidence looked convincing, and that was what made it dangerous. Someone had carefully mixed truth with lies. Enough truth to make the lie believable. Lucian looked at Soren. He needed only one thing. Not a speech. Not a fight. Just a sign that Soren still chose him. But Soren remained silent. The room waited. Lucian felt his chest tighten. For one terrible second, he was back in that dining room. Back in the moment when he looked at Soren and wondered if he was about to lose everything. "Soren," Lucian whispered. The alpha looked at him, and there was pain in his eyes. But he still did not speak. To everyone else, it looked like doubt. To Lucian, it felt like history repeating itself. He stood slowly. "I understand." Soren immediately moved, but Lucian stepped back. "No, let me finish." His voice remained steady, but his heart was breaking. "I thought this time was different." Soren looked at him. "Lucian, please. I thought you finally trusted me." The words were quiet. That made them heavier. "But now I am standing here again, waiting to see if you will choose me." The room became completely silent. Soren wanted to explain. He wanted to tell Lucian that he was not staying silent because he doubted him. He was staying silent because his legal team had discovered something bigger. The documents were part of a larger trap, and revealing everything too early could destroy the evidence needed to expose the person behind it. But looking at Lucian, Soren realized something painful. Protecting the truth while leaving Lucian feeling abandoned was still hurting him. Before Soren could speak, Lucian quietly removed his wedding ring and placed it on the table. Not as a final goodbye, as a sign that he could not keep losing himself just to wait for someone else to choose him. "I need to know that I am your choice," Lucian said. "Not your responsibility. Not your image. Not your family obligation." Then he walked away. Soren watched him leave, unable to move. The same man who had faced corporate battles, family pressure, and public criticism without hesitation felt completely powerless. Because this time, the person he needed to protect was not his company, not his name. It was the person who had spent years believing in him. And now Lucian no longer knew if he could believe back. That night, Soren finally opened the complete investigation file. The missing evidence was there. The person behind the altered medical records, the false documents, and the public accusations had made one mistake. They had left a connection that led directly back to them. Soren looked at the file and realized there was only one chance left. Not to explain privately, not to apologize quietly, but to choose Lucian where everyone could see. Lucian Everhard had spent the last 24 hours believing that he had finally reached the end of his strength. He had survived being accused. He had survived being judged. He had even survived learning that the man he loved had hidden a part of himself for years. But standing alone after leaving the meeting, with his wedding ring no longer on his finger, Lucian wondered if there was a limit to how many times a heart could choose to trust. He did not want revenge. He did not want people to suffer. He only wanted one thing that he had been asking for from the beginning: the truth. The next morning, the Whitaker family held an emergency public meeting. Executives, family representatives, and media members gathered inside the company's main conference hall. Everyone expected Soren Whitaker to announce a separation, distance himself from the controversy, and protect the family reputation. That was what powerful people usually did. They protected themselves first. Lucian almost did not attend. But then he received a message from Soren. 3 words. Please be there. Lucian arrived quietly and sat in the back of the room. He did not know what Soren planned to say. He did not know if he could trust the outcome. But he knew he needed to hear the truth. Soren entered the room without his usual calm expression. For the first time, the man everyone saw as untouchable looked like someone carrying the weight of every mistake he had made. He walked to the front and placed a folder on the table. Before anyone makes another judgment about Lucian Everhard, you need to see the full story. The room became silent. Dorian Ashford stood among the guests, confident that the evidence he created had already won. Soren opened the folder. The documents released yesterday were incomplete. Screens behind him displayed the original records. The missing pages, the altered signatures, the timeline showing that certain files had been accessed before the accusations against Lucian ever began. Then Soren revealed the connection that changed everything. The same person who had pushed the infertility rumors years earlier had also been involved in creating the false documents that suggested Lucian had manipulated the marriage. The evidence did not appear magically. It came from the investigation that had been building since the first medical discovery. Dorian's expression changed. For the first time, he looked uncertain. You are misunderstanding the situation, Dorian said. I was only trying to protect you. Soren looked at him calmly. No, you were trying to control the story. The room stayed silent. Soren continued. You knew my greatest insecurity. You knew I believed I could never have a family. You used that fear to make me doubt the person who stood beside me. Lucian watched from the back of the room. He expected anger from Soren. What surprised him was the disappointment. Soren was not speaking like a powerful alpha destroying an enemy. He was speaking like someone finally understanding how much damage had been done. Then Soren turned toward Lucian. Everyone followed his gaze. But the biggest mistake was not what Dorian did. His voice became quieter. The biggest mistake was mine. Lucian felt the room shift. Soren had never been someone who admitted fault publicly. Not in front of executives. Not in front of family. Not in front of the entire world. I believed a lie because it matched my own fear, Soren said. I hurt the person who spent years believing in me because I was too afraid to believe I was worthy of happiness. No one spoke. Soren walked away from the table and toward Lucian. Not as a CEO. Not as the heir of a powerful family. Just as the man who had almost lost him. Lucian, our relationship may have started during a time when I was trying to protect my family name and understand my place in the world. But everything that came after was real. He looked at him directly. You were never someone I needed to protect because you were weak. You were someone I wanted beside me because you made me stronger. Lucian felt the emotions he had been holding back finally break through. But this time, it was not humiliation. It was recognition. Soren was not asking the world to forgive Lucian. He was telling the world to see him. Lucian Everhard is not a scandal, Soren said. He is the person who built programs that helped thousands of people. He is the person who stayed when I gave him every reason to leave. And he is the person I choose. The cameras captured the moment. The same public that had watched Lucian fall now watched Soren stand beside him. Dorian's influence disappeared almost instantly. The family members who had questioned Lucian had no argument left. His own actions had created the evidence that exposed him. Later, when the room finally emptied, Lucian and Soren stood together in silence. There was no instant repair. No pretending the pain never happened. But something important had returned. Choice. Soren had chosen him when it mattered most. Lucian looked at him and quietly said, You finally let me see you. Soren nodded. I should have done that years ago. For the first time in a long time, Lucian reached for Soren's hand. Not because he needed protection. Not because he was afraid to be alone. Because he wanted to. But as they left the building, Soren's phone received one final message from the investigation team. The person who helped Dorian create the plan had been identified, and the name connected to the entire betrayal was closer to the Whitaker family than anyone expected. Lucian Everhart used to think the most painful moment of his life would always be the night he stood in that dining room and watched the person he loved believe someone else. He remembered the candles, the silence, the feeling of carrying a future in his heart, while everyone around him looked at him like he had destroyed theirs. But standing outside the Whitaker family estate weeks later, Lucian realized something had changed. The memory still hurt. The scar was still there, but it no longer controlled him. Because Lucian was no longer the person waiting for someone else to decide his worth. He knew who he was. He knew what he had given. And he knew what kind of love he deserved. The investigation was finally complete. The person who helped Dorian manipulate the medical records was exposed, and the truth was officially recognized. The years of confusion surrounding Soren's infertility, the false accusations, and the documents designed to destroy Lucian's reputation were finally behind them. But the most important part of healing was not the public apology. It was what happened after everyone stopped watching. Soren did not return to his old habits. He did not assume that one grand gesture could repair everything. Instead, he started proving his change through the smallest actions. He asked before making decisions. He listened before speaking. He showed up when Lucian needed support, not because he felt guilty, but because he genuinely wanted to be part of his life. When Lucian had a difficult day, Soren did not try to fix everything. He simply sat beside him and asked, "Do you want advice, or do you want me to stay?" It was a simple question, but for Lucian, it meant everything. Because for years, Soren had tried to protect him by controlling the world around him. Now he was learning that loving someone meant trusting them enough to stand beside you. Months later, their lives looked different. The luxury home that once felt like a place full of expectations became a real home. There were no more carefully planned appearances. No more pretending for family members or business partners. There were quiet mornings, shared meals, and conversations that did not need to be perfect. Lucian continued his medical work and expanded the programs he created. People who once knew him only as Soren Whitaker's Omega now knew him as Lucian Everhard, someone respected for his own achievements. That mattered more than any title. One evening, Soren brought Lucian back to the same dining room where everything had fallen apart. Lucian stopped when he saw the table prepared. For a moment, he thought about the night they had almost lost everything. Soren noticed his expression. "I know this place holds bad memories." Lucian looked at him. "Then why bring me here?" Soren took a breath. "Because I do not want the last memory of this room to be the one where I failed you." He placed a small box on the table. Inside was not a symbol of obligation or a family expectation. It was a simple replacement for the ring Lucian had removed during the darkest moment of their relationship. "The first time I gave you a ring, I thought it meant protecting my family name," Soren said. "I was wrong." He looked at Lucian. "This time I want it to mean that I choose you. Not because I need you. Not because of our child. Not because anyone expects it. Because I love the person you are." Lucian did not answer immediately. The old Lucian would have been afraid to hesitate. He would have worried that asking for time meant risking everything. But the new Lucian understood something important. Love was not something he had to earn by accepting pain. Love was something he was allowed to choose. "I believe you," Lucian finally said. "But I need you to remember something." Soren nodded. "Anything. I was never waiting for you to save me." Lucian smiled softly. "I was waiting for you to see me." Soren's eyes softened. "I see you now." And this time, Lucian believed him. Later, when their child was born, Soren held their new family with the same care he once struggled to show. The alpha who once believed strength meant never needing anyone finally understood that real strength came from allowing someone to know you completely. Years ago, Lucian had stood in that same room feeling like he had lost everything. Now he stood there knowing the truth. He had never been the person who needed to be chosen because he was already worthy. The greatest change was not that Soren finally chose him. It was that Lucian finally chose himself first. And when Soren reached for his hand this time, Lucian did not hold on because he was afraid of losing him. He held on because, after everything they had survived, they were choosing the same future together.